Okay. All right, so thank you, Terry, for the introduction. And as the archivist here at the library, I'm really happy that Kyle joined me in this because as obvious, Kyle's much younger than me. I mean, I don't know how hard it is to tell, but no, Kyle Ray Davis, you know, Cindy remembers him when he came to the library for story hour, and he made it a point to tell her, you know, it's Kyle Ray Davis. So I just put Kyle Davis.
You make me blush.
But no, it's really nice. I know some of you were here for Samantha Sharp's presentation a month or so ago, and you know, it is nice to see you know, some of the younger people getting involved and playing a part in these kind of presentations. And Kyle's been doing an excellent job, and we enjoy presenting at Springs and Cumberland and now here. Some of you know Randall Fry. He's right there in the middle from Johnstown, but he has roots here in Meyersdale, and probably one of these days we're going to get him to do some sort of presentation here. A couple of you were at the Olinger House tours last year and enjoyed his talk. And we do have, for the Historical Society, we have some recent issues of our Backtracks newsletter here. So feel free to take a copy if you'd like. We have some membership forms too for the Historical Society. Just ignore the fact that they say 2023. If you're interested in joining the Historical Society, take a form, fill it out, or come see me here at the library. Or Karen, our station manager, is here, and she can help you out too. And we're also, in honor of Meyersdale's 150th, our Historical Society's annual raffle this year is a grand prize. We're giving away $1,150. So if you're interested in a chance to win over a grand, plus some nice lodging packages here for our B&Bs throughout Meyersdale. Station's open every day, 9 to 4:30, and they can set you up there with tickets. But without further ado, we present Meyersdale at 150, the story of a small town. It was a little challenging to put this presentation together because you're basically trying to wrap up, so to speak, 150 years worth of history in an hour's time. So what Kyle and I kind of decided to do in talking about this in its earliest stages, you know, we're going to hit on some of the high points, and you know, we want to point out a lot of good things that our community has here, but we also are also focusing on some of the challenges that come with time and have come to our small towns over the years, and you'll see that as we go along. But initially, we're showing some photographs. Some of you, I know, took part in the February 17th bell ringing. And that was an idea that Tom Dietz here, he's our chair of the 150th committee, which we, you know, put together in the early days of 2023. And we've been working ever since to organize the different activities through town. And he had the idea on February 17th, which was the day that Meyersdale was incorporated as Meyersdale Borough in 1874. We were actually incorporated as Dale City in 1871. But of course, members of the Myers family had a little issue with that, and understandably so. They were very prominent in the community. So as people tend to do, there was some, you know, probably a little bit of bickering back and forth on the name. And I know people don't bicker, do they? But you know, 1874 they settled on Meyersdale. We've been Meyersdale ever since. And so we kicked off the year of celebrating with a simple bell ringing. The churches rang their bells. We gathered at the library. People brought their own bells. Randall had Colonel George Foy's bell. And then there's a photo there of Representative Carl Walker Metzger presenting us with a citation commemorating the town's 150th. And this is a group of Historical Society staff and volunteers and board members. Karen came up with a great idea for our 150th float, our celebratory cake. And there we are in the Maple Festival Parade.
Yeah, if it's not clear enough already, me and Jennifer are both board members of the Meyersdale Area Historical Society. And this is our building. It's the restored Western Maryland Railway Station located up here at the top of Main Street. And aside from being a museum and a meeting place for our society, it's also a trailhead for the Great Allegheny Passage, which is the bike path. And I spent 3 summers up there working as a station attendant and meeting a lot of different people that were traveling through and had stopped here at our building to be greeted into Meyersdale, which is a really cool experience, getting to share that kind of history with people who were, you know, oblivious to who we even were and were coming from out of the area.
And we had to feature our library in one of the slides. Of course, the library has existed here in Meyersdale thanks to the Women's Club since 1939. 85 years. So, you know, that in itself, I believe, is truly impressive. A lot of towns our size don't have a library. This little photo is a snapshot of 2 girls coming down the steps when the library was first housed in the old Republican building. That is now our church parking lot. The corner.
There many times.
I know, a lot of you were, I'll bet. I know some of you remember being there, right? And then, was it 64, 65? We moved down the street to the old Lucente building, which is now gone, right up from Duncas's. And those are some of the kids recruited to carry the books down the street. The library's 3rd home was in the old school building, now D&D apartment building. That's where I remember Mom taking me for story hour as a kid. And then in 1984, they had a huge fundraising campaign and constructed the library that we're in now, and it was dedicated in May of '85. And it's interesting, you can, Terry mentioned the Power Library earlier. Online in the Power Library, which is free for anyone to look at. I won't go into detail now, but if you're interested and want to know more, come see me, call me, email me. I can clue you in a little bit on the Power Library and what we have there. We've got a nice collection of photos documenting the construction of this building. When you look at those photos and you see all this empty space, there's one of Linda McDonough reading to the kids back in what's now the PA room, and it's a big empty room with Linda and the kids and like a film projector and nothing else. And now, well, most of you know the PA room's a little more full than that now. But it's good. We're always growing, and that's a good thing.
And many of you may be familiar with one, if not both, of these logos. These are the Ken Snelson logos designed to celebrate Meyersdale's anniversary. The one on the left was created in 1974 for the town's 100th anniversary, and the one on the right is the more recent one that was created for this year. And in Ken's original design, he incorporated symbols showing the railroad, agriculture, mining, and the maple industry. And these are also included in the 2024 logo with the addition of the bike trail represented by the Big Savage Tunnel there in the center.
And I saw Ken today. He told me 50 years from now we're going to have to get someone else to revise the logo. I said, yeah, 50 years from now, Ken, we'll let other people worry about it all. But yeah, the committee in '74 had a contest, and in the Pennsylvania room we have a binder with the different submissions for the contest that people entered, and those are interesting to look through in themselves. But Ken won and did a great job this year of revising the logo for us.
So before we get into the more modern Meyersdale history, I wanted to explore the Monongahela people, which were really the first inhabitants of the area that would become Meyersdale. And they, of course, lived simple, primitive lives along the Somerset County Plateau. They thrived along the Castleman River, so we can actually find evidence of them settling not just here, but along that river up into the northern part of the county and down through. And this is a Historical Society former president, Dennis Butch Stahl, with a display case. He generously lends to us his collection of Monongahela artifacts to us throughout the year. And this is an illustration done by Dennis Stahl that just shows the area that the Monongahela people would have settled, which includes the entirety of Somerset County. So you can see just how far they would have been settling and living, and of course they were sort of a nomadic people, so they didn't stay in one place for too long, and they would usually follow a water source.
And we have some friends here with us tonight from Cumberland, and you can see that their area would have covered that, you know, portion of our states as well, what would later become our states.
And this is just an illustration showing what a very simple Monongahela village would look like. You can see they would have usually like a palisaded little wall around, keeping them safe from predators and anyone trying to sneak in. But they lived a very simple life along Somerset County, and it's somewhat similar to what the early Europeans would experience as well, with the harsh weather conditions, and something that we still kind of see today with extreme summers and really cold winters. And they lived in the Meyersdale area from roughly the 10th century into the 16th century. But they had sort of disappeared by the time that the Europeans arrived. There wasn't any direct contact between them and the early settlers. They had been long gone, and there's not necessarily a clear explanation as to why. You can sort of imagine they would have experienced some sort of a horrible famine or a really harsh winter that would have driven them from this area. So then, of course, decades later, waves of 18th century Western European settlers ventured into this region. They braved unknown danger for the opportunities of fertile soil and untapped natural resources. And these earliest pioneers laid the groundwork for future generations of settlers that came over in the next couple of years.
Okay, so this is one of the images. Probably most of you here tonight are aware that when the New Republic closed in November of 2022, our library was fortunate enough, publisher George Menser saw to it that we acquired all of the photographs and negatives that they had. We initially thought there were, what, George, a handful of boxes. Yeah. And, you know, I'd walk down the street and bring them up, and then, you know, after a couple days the phone would ring and George would be like, I found another box. And, you know, you're kind of glad you found another box, but then, you know, 4 phone calls later, you're like, oh my, you know, my room's not growing back there, but George keeps finding photo boxes. But we have a wonderful group of volunteers, and a number of them are here tonight, are the Way We Work Club. And they regularly meet it here at the library. They sorted, organized, ID'd photographs. They've been scanning photographs. This image, there was one batch. The negatives came to us in boxes, and they were roughly labeled, let's just say. There was one batch labeled old-time photos. Well, that was the first batch that caught our attention and we scanned. And there are 31 photographs in that batch. They call them large format negatives, or about measure 4 by 5 inches. This is one of them. And in the 1950s, the newspaper would actually run one of these photographs every week. And you remember? And they would ask, you know, does anyone know who these people are? A lot of them were identified that way. I didn't get into that much detail here with this program, but the book that we've put together features some of these images and some of those identifications. I just love this image. You know, it shows a horse and buggy. You can see the cobblestone street and the trolley line that ran up Center Street. And we know this is Center Street because, as you can see, there's really only one window in town that looks that way. Citizens Bank there in the background. Digging into these photos, they were apparently taken between 1910 and 1920. They came to the newspaper years and years ago from one of the Reichs, someone in the Reich family, and they had been captured around town and were meant to be shown at the Reich Auditorium. I haven't at this point in time found any documentation of that happening, which now today is the old State Theater building. So that's a little bit of history on that photo, and we'll be showing a couple more throughout the slide presentation. One day, we're hopeful of putting all 31 one line in the Power Library and PA Photos and Documents, where you'll be able to see them all. And we'll make that happen one of these days.
Meyersdale became a stop on the Pittsburgh to Cumberland connection in 1871 with the B&O Railroad, and you can see that station is where the current CSX is at in town today. So that location has remained a central area for railroad activities.
And the photo on the left is an image that you can now view online in one of our library's Power Library collections. There are some fantastic old photos in our original photo collection online. And again, if you're at all interested, you know, I can show you how you're able to view those.
And we wanted to show you the Sanborn maps. They were a collection of basically fire insurance maps that were laid out for the town beginning in 1887. And they're color coordinated. You can kind of see there's yellow, there's red, there's a little bit of green, and that designates whether a home or a building was made of wood or brick or had some other sort of special purpose. And at this time, the town was small enough that they were able to fit all the information that they needed in 2 pages. And we'll get into that a little bit later. You'll see how that sort of changed over time and evolved and grew as the town itself grew.
Yeah, these were the only 2 sheets representing the town in 1887. And a quick note regarding these Sanborn maps, as Terry had mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't realize, you know, what all a library card can provide to you. With our library, with one of our library cards, you can link through on our website, again, free to you, through to these old Sanborn maps. Not only for Meyersdale, but for different towns throughout Somerset County. I think we even have a few in Cambria County. Yeah, all you need is a library card, and then we could show you where you go on our website and how you link through. And they're fascinating to look at. They're kind of one of those things, you know, the more you look at them, the more you see. Like Kyle said, the yellow indicates wooden structures, the red indicates, or pink indicates brick. And Linda Brenneman and I have been going back and forth a little bit. We get into all kinds of things and questions in the PA room. But the Lutheran church, if you look down here on Main Street, the Lutheran church, I think it's here. Our Lutheran church used to be down Main Street, roughly where the Brethren church now is, and the Brethren church was across the street. Now, and we're going back to 1887. At that point in time, they were both much simpler wooden structures. The Methodist church is further up the street, and then the Reformed is on here too.
Right at the very top.
Yeah. So, you know, you can really spend some time looking at these old fire insurance maps. And if you're interested, just, you know, come see me. I can show you how to do that. This is an image that is currently available online in our collections. This is a view from atop 1897 from the top of Kreitzberg Hill, as it was at, now we more commonly know it as Sailor Hill. And this would be Broadway. You can roughly see the B&O line going through here, and there's the old bridge. The one reason I chose to include this picture, this is something I never even realized existed until maybe, what, Linda, about a year or so ago. I forget what we were digging into in the Pennsylvania room. The brewery?
The Olinger thing, and we're talking about the brewery.
Yeah. This building over here was called the Mountain Electric Supply Company. It had 127 windows. There's not a lot that I've found about it, other than in 1898, Meyersdale used to have 2 newspapers. There was a newspaper called the Meyersdale Commercial. We have it on microfilm in the Pennsylvania room from 1881. It was done by roughly around 1930. But in 1898, there was an article in the Commercial about Meyersdale's growth and everything that was happening. The poor Mountain Electric Supply Company, they referred to it as Meyersdale's one failure. They don't give detail as to why it was a fail. I mean, you know, towns have their failures. Individuals, we all have our failures. The Mountain Electric Supply Company was one of Meyersdale's failures. But I mean, when you look, it's a fascinating building, yeah. And I don't know a lot. I haven't got a lot of detail on it, but it's interesting. It's interesting the pieces of history that are lost over time, and the things that you still can discover sometimes just by accident.
Many of you are going to be familiar with this location here. This is a depiction of the Myers homestead somewhere between 1900 and 1910. What I'd like to point out to you is that there is a man-made body of water, sort of a little river going through the property there, which was implemented to supply the mill that the Myers had at that time. And of course, that has long been covered over with soil. You can't even really tell that it was there, but it's interesting to see that depicted in this photo.
I'm thinking roughly, if you're in our craft building today, you're where the mill race once ran through. And again, I was looking a little more closely at the Sanborn maps today, and I think it was on that old 1887 map. You can see where there's a body of water in the vicinity of what we now know as Maple Manor. And it's wonderful that some of these old structures do still remain. I know most of us do lament when our historical homes no longer exist. You know, the Colonial's a good example. You know, the fact is, when buildings let go too long, it can reach that point where, you know, it's essentially beyond repair unless you have an endless supply of funding. But you know, there are some homes, including this one, that the festival maintains that we still have, and that's a wonderful thing. This is another photograph. It can be viewed online in one of our collections. This is an image captured in the cemetery. And you'll see this in another, well, maybe not in the book that I put together. There's a photo relating to the hospital, where the trees that are kind of block the view from the cemetery now weren't always there. I selected this image, again, I mean, we could study this picture alone for 10 minutes, but the one thing I wanted to point out, this would be Lard Street. Here's the Flockerty. This is Lard Street. This little church right there was the African American Methodist Episcopal Church. I want to say they started constructing it late 1800s. It was dedicated in 1902. I'm still trying to get more information on maybe when it was torn down. But it had a thriving congregation. A lot of people don't realize that Meyersdale had a substantial African American community in the early days of the 1900s, and really up into the 40s, 50s, although it dwindled over time. But in the 1940s, there was a little study done on that church, and it was the only African American church, according to that study, in Somerset County. I find that pretty intriguing, and I do hope one day I'd like to do a presentation on our African American community, because you know, that community played a role in Meyersdale's formation over the years as well. This is, those of you who, Randall's got a big smile on his face. Those of you who joined us last August at 125 Broadway, that's the address of this home right there on the corner of Broadway and Grant Street. It was constructed by John and Sarah Olinger, 1869-70. And again, the Myers family is more well known in Meyersdale. I mean, Meyersdale is named after them, but the Olingers were also one of our founding families and played a big role in Meyersdale's earliest days. And that's the home that John, who would have been the grandson of the original pioneer, John Olinger, constructed. And it, fortunately, it still stands as well across the street from the Legion. These are two more pictures from that old time photos collection. Here we see a group coming out of the Methodist Church. At one point in time, we kind of thought that might have been a group of suffragists coming out from a suffrage meeting, but I've since learned that it doesn't appear it was. It appears it was a group of congregants coming out on a Sunday morning from a service. And then this is the Main Street Brethren Church. You can see the old school building in the background. Great old photos for the buildings in the background, but just, we don't get that dressed up for much of anything these days, do we? Just the clothing, little kids in their hats and their jackets, and they're just great old images, and thankfully we have them. This is another one. If you walked out the library door and headed up Center Street toward Catholic Hill, you can see this would be Amity's steeple in the background. This building right over here was the Slicer Hotel. It was torn down 3738 for the construction of the post office. The post office today stands where the Slicer Hotel once stood. So this is a neat view looking up Center Street. Again, you see the cobblestone street.
And of course, this is Meyersdale's fire department. I would like to point out to you that there was a alert fire department that existed in the community for a number of years before our modern fire department was founded in 1899.
And looking into this photo, I'm almost certain it would have been taken in front of what they used to call the Grant Street School building. And some of you probably raise your hand if you went to
old enough
yeah,
to know this.
Yeah, where our fire hall is today. There used to be a large school building there too.
So Meyersdale was at the forefront of the industrial age, and we're going to take some time to explore that a little bit. But you can imagine that some of the things thriving at this time, agriculture, of course, had a boost as technology progressed, and the railroad brought in a lot of business.
I chose to include, again, this is one of those old images, a great image all on its own, but I like the quote. This was out of that Meyersdale commercial article titled "An 1898 View of Meyersdale," and they wrote at that point in time in the commercial that the growth of the town since the completion of the B&O Railroad in 1871 has been phenomenal. This is not only the largest, most populous town in the county, but it has the finest mercantile houses, the largest stocks of goods, the greatest varieties, the most progressive businessmen. And I thought that quote kind of suited this image because, if you were a kid in Meyersdale in the early days of the 1900s, the future, I guess you could say, looked pretty bright for you in a sense.
And this here is an image of the Western Maryland Viaduct being constructed. Today we know it as the Salisbury Viaduct, of course. This image here captured in 1911, and we know a couple of the gentlemen in the photo. I think it's on the far right. The far left is Calvin Lint, Frank Rubright, John Warner, and then on the far right is Joseph Arnold. And this image was taken a little bit before there was a catastrophe that claimed the lives of a handful of railroad workers whenever they were completing the viaduct. We don't believe it was any of these men that we have listed here, but it's hard to say. So Meyersdale was a town big enough to have two railroads, which is a pretty cool accomplishment to have. It just shows you how much business was going on and how prosperous the town was, that the railroads had to compete with one another for the territory and to keep up with one another.
And this is an image of, these images are faint, but this is our railway station, and then the Western Maryland or the Salisbury Viaduct, roughly around 1912 is when that railroad line came through. So you imagine, town has two newspapers, it has two railroad lines. It's not exaggerating at all to say Meyersdale was booming. It really was in the early 1900s.
And of course, the other industries in town, coal mining, logging, steel production, and agriculture boomed along with the supplementation of the railroad.
And this is an image, 1898, of the coke ovens at Shaw Mines. And I mean, you have to look closely, but you can kind of see the coke ovens here on the sides. We have some neat old photographs of those that we've scanned, that images that were captured in the 1980s when they took out the coke ovens out there.
Hats off to our railroad lines.
We thought that picture was cute.
Here,
That is cute.
Okay, and there also used to be what they called narrow gauge railway lines. And this is a photograph from our library's collections of one of the what they called dinky engines that would have pulled the cars that ran along these narrow gauge railway lines. And there was one that ran from Shaw Mines out to the Savage Fire Brickyard out past Glade City. And apparently the railway line ran kind of right on the bottom, near the bottom of Union Cemetery. Butch Stahl kind of explained to me once how roughly where his son Andy lives, right kind of somewhere in that vicinity this railway line ran. I don't know, I haven't personally seen any hints of it, anything that might still remain, but I don't know, there could be a couple signs still up that way. This is a neat old picture of the Savage Brick Fire Company that existed from 1871 to 1913. Again, out past Glade City. You can see this would have been the Western Maryland line up here. And, or no, I'm sorry, that would have been the B&O line. And then down here is Flockerty. And there was a fire there in 1898. But it was rebuilt, and after that rebuild, the plant covered 8,000 square feet and produced 40,000 bricks daily.
That's a lot.
Again, all these things, coal, bricks, they're all contributing to the town's growth. I walk a lot, between home and the library, and probably any of you have spent any time, Kalani, walking around Meyersdale, you've seen some Savage bricks, reading Savage Fire Brick, underneath your feet as you walk along. They're not that hard to find through town, really, if you spend some time walking around. This image is from our collections. I don't know with 100% certainty that it was taken at Savage Fire Brick. I suspect it was. You can see, they'd be holding the brick molds, and there are a few African Americans in this image as well. It's just it's a great old image of a group of workers, and there are children in the image.
I say, are those
too.
children laborers?
I don't know. I don't know. We've
But it's possible.
had that discussion ourselves. Good chance to some degree, maybe. I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, this little guy here is tiny, and there are a couple little girls.
Yeah, they're kind of dressed up too, so it almost looks like
But
a
there is a young man over on the
stage
left side
photo.
holding something. So
Yeah,
he's a bit older than the other children, I think.
yeah.
Maybe it was like a family
Picnic day or something.
Yeah, I don't know. You look at these old pictures and you wonder. You do. You kind of ask yourself those questions. Now, lumber would have also been needed, of course. I mean, you're building one building after another, so you need lumber for that. This is an image that means a little something special to me. We recently acquired this image from Dave Meese over in Berlin, and it was taken in Greenville Township around 1902. This gentleman right here was Francis Bear, and he was my three times grandfather. This is his son George, and it's kind of interesting. I mean, again, you notice, I don't know, the older we all get, the more we see like our parents and us, I think, you know, in how you look and your mannerisms, and in all seriousness, like a lot of, I do it, but a lot of men in my family tend to stand there like this, you know, and I'm like, is that something we've always done, you know, like arms full, they're Francis and George, they're the only guys in the picture with their arms crossed. Now, unfortunately, we know this picture would have been around 1902, or definitely not after that, because in the late winter, early spring of 1903, the portable sawmill boiler exploded and claimed Francis's life. And that's a picture from, again, part of our, we received a wonderful collection around last Christmas of great old images representing families and scenes from Greenville, Larimer townships. We haven't digitized those yet, but we'll get to it one of these days. But we wanted to include some of these pictures, like Kyle said. He was the one who kind of put together the outline for this presentation, and, you know, had the idea that we wanted to feature the industrial age because to kind of represent, you know, tell you just a little bit about Meyersdale's growth and the things involved with that. And here is another, this would be the cover of the Sanborn map from 1919. And if you remember, in 1887, the Sanborn map, it only took 2 sheets to cover Meyersdale. Again, 1892 was the same thing. But you can see up through the years, by 1910, the Sanborn map for Meyersdale comprised 9 sheets. And by 1919, it was 10 sheets. And both of these are just 2 of the 10 sheets representing Meyersdale in 1919. And we pulled these because here you have Center Street's intersection with Main Street. We'd be,
Yeah,
right now, that's us. And then here, Market Square. And you can just see the phenomenal growth over the span of about 30 years here in Meyersdale.
And it's interesting to see how many more red or pink buildings there are. So there was definitely more brick structures. We just talked about how, you know, the brickworks and that kind of thing. So that was all, of course, contributing to the town's growth. And you need resources in order to build the town up.
Yeah, and here you can see on this one, here, this would have been, yeah, this is Flockerty. Flockerty's over here. You know, here you're going up Center Street. You can cross what's now our Harry Beale Bridge. Center becomes Beakley at the bridge. So this would have been that mill race that was near the, I think that would be Maple Manor. They're interesting to look at. That you can really spend some time studying them.
Hot off the press. We wanted to just mention again, you know, the newspapers and what they've contributed to our community. As Jen said, we had 2 at one point, the Commercial and the Meyersdale Republican, eventually the New Republic. And this is an image just whenever they used to print the newspaper actually in town. You know, we had it printed locally, and it's a pretty neat image to see that.
We have a great collection, and George has sat down with me and gone through them. And Shirley Vogt has too, because her father was Herman Bayshore, who for years was publisher of the Republican. And we have some great old images, and I have a couple pages in the book devoted to them. I think most of them were taken when the newspaper, the Republican, would have been celebrating its 50th anniversary in 1950. Again, up the street in the original Meyersdale Republican building. This is just one of them. Another program we'd like to present, and I've talked with both George and Shirley about this, is you know, just kind of have an evening where we share these old photographs, and people like George and Shirley who know a little bit about, you know, what's going on in the pictures and who's in them could come in and, you know, share some of their memories about them. It's fascinating in itself, you know, just technology and how, you know, a newspaper is just one example of how technology has substantially changed things. And now, unfortunately, our newspapers are dying, and it's not just here. You know, it's everywhere.
So moving into the post-war years, we wanted to include this To show a little bit, mention Meyersdale's military history. The Doughboy statue, of course, was erected originally to honor the servicemen from World War I, but it's sort of come to be a symbol for just general armed service for the Meyersdale community. And this was likely taken at a Veterans Day service in the center of town.
You can see the old, this would be where Sheets is today. This building still stands. At that point it was the Maple Valley Inn. Anyone remember the Maple?
It's a taxi in here.
Okay. And up here on the hill, I mean, you can see there's a pretty good tree line at this point. Cemetery. It's even interesting to, when you really study these pictures, to notice how lights have changed, like the street lights. And if you know, if you're well versed in such things, someone who knew a lot about street lights could probably pretty narrow down the time frame of that image just by looking at the street light. We kind of felt we had to include a picture of the shirt factory. I mean, I have my doubts there's hardly anyone in this room who doesn't know someone, who worked at the shirt factory, whether a family member, a friend. If you have any sort of roots in Meyersdale, someone you knew, probably someone in your family worked at the shirt factory. Ground for it was broken in 1928 and it existed until 2005. Another very substantial employer here in Meyersdale for many years. And we have some great old photos, both in the Pennsylvania room and up at the train station, of shirt factory employees.
And this is Shipley's Hardware, located along Center Street. This image here was captured somewhere between 1946 and 1950, and that building still stands, although it has a little bit of a different facade. But if you're looking along Center Street up that direction, you can kind of see how similar it was then. It's changed a little bit. The structures and the buildings have undergone renovations and improvements, but really the look of Center Street has remained the same for many years at this point.
And the reason we know this had to be captured before 1950 is because it was in 1950 that building was encased in brick. I forget how we pinpointed 19.
Yeah, the model of the cars there.
Yeah, but there was some.
It was the parking meters.
The parking meters were installed in 46, right? So yeah, so we kind of dated this picture by figuring out, okay, when did they install parking meters? 46. When did they cover the Shipley building in brick? So again, we know, okay, we see parking meters, there's no brick, has to be roughly that time frame. Yeah. Trust us. If those of you who spend time in the peer room know, you can go down some rabbit holes with some of these pictures or family histories or whatever it may be.
I wanted to include a couple of photos of the Maple Festival, and this is just a miscellaneous collection taken over the years. As you can see, they're all in color, of course, but this is a tradition that has been in our town since 1948. But the spirit of maple and that production and that sort of agriculture has existed for much longer, of course.
And these are all from another collection that you can view online. The Maple Festival a few years ago lent us a collection of their 35mm slides. We digitized them, got some grant money and put them online. And even, again, the more you look at these pictures, the more you see, I got a kick out of this lady standing in line smoking. Again, that kind of dates. I mean, not that you don't see people smoking anymore, but it is not as commonplace, at least in public, as it once was, even 20 years ago.
And this is one of my favorite images, just because it shows some of the contrast at that time. This is from 1967, but you can sort of notice that at that time, the cars being paraded through Center Street are antiques. And of course, we still think of them as antiques, but now we would consider the cars on the right side of the road. You can kind of see the way that the design of cars has changed at that time too. The older style is a lot more tall and sort of round and bubbly, whereas at that time the newer vehicles were flat and very square, very rectangular in shape. And there's just kind of a cool kid propped up against the car there, watching the cars roll by. It's a very neat image, and you can see a lot of different things in the background there too that date the image just based on the fact of what was on Center Street at that time.
Yeah. I personally, as a kid, remember the Laurel Sports Shop being Main Street. Again, I learned something when I took in this picture. Like, hey, the sports shop was on Center Street at one point.
Moved around.
Again, some of you
Moved around a lot.
probably remember that. This was, can someone help me?
It was the VFW.
But the VFW used to be along Center, but what restaurant would that have been? I think I've seen it some.
Was that
Mornings?
Okay, I don't know for sure. I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
Robertson's was up along
That was
Main
up
Street,
Main.
right?
Well,
Yeah.
Pavanel's is down here.
Yeah,
Down
yeah.
on the corner.
Pavanel's would have been right
Down
over,
here.
right over here. And I did read, I think it was in the Centennial book, but don't hold me to that. Early in the town's founding, when the founding fathers of Meyersdale, their initial intent was to have Main Street essentially be what you call the business hub, I guess. But over time, for whatever reason, Center Street really was the street, more so than Main, that contained, Main Street had businesses and still does, but really Center Street was the more of a business.
Main was filled up.
Yeah. But, and you just know that, like, if you crashed one of these cars into one of today's cars, you know which one would come out on top, right? These were those.
It's funny how that older design kind of comes back, and now vehicles are made to be taller and sort of round shaped. And now the square design is a thing of the past.
So yeah, give it a decade or two, maybe we'll all be driving big boxes.
Yeah, we'll go back.
I don't know about that, but.
Oh my, look at this.
And there, our fair that just ended. And it's the county fair, but, it's since 1900, it's been in just outside of Meyersdale. So Kyle and I just both really thought this was
Again, the cars you can kind of date to when that would have been, and it's neat to see that lined up in that way. And if you took a photo like that now, it would look a lot different, obviously.
Yeah.
My dad had a car that was like that.
Yeah, you're right, Paul. I don't know today.
so neatly.
I know, those cars were lined up pretty uniformly. It was probably George Boy out there telling them where to park. Guys with military backgrounds.
I think we were told where to park.
They were pretty strict.
You park right here. Yeah.
And this is two photos also from the fair. The one on the left shows the carnival, and we really like that image because it shows two Ferris wheels. So that just gives you an idea of how big the carnival was. And of course there's a crowd of people that are participating in games and going to rides, and it's a very neat photo, seeing the way that the light kind of works, with it being black and white. And on the right is an image captured of the fair parade, and this is the old style grandstands. You can see they were more wooden in construction. They had an overhang over them, and here is the FFA chapter of Meyersdale promoting that maple syrup is good anytime.
If you don't like pure Somerset County maple syrup, just remain mum. Say nothing.
Right.
So touching back again on the fire department, of course, volunteerism continued to thrive in Meyersdale. And this is a small collection of images that show the Meyersdale Volunteer Fire Department during the 1950s. And this is whenever their station would have been located at the corner of Center and Dale Street. And up at that building today, you can still see where their engine bay would have been, where they would have been coming out to respond to the emergency.
This is an image that is in the book that we've put
So you've been able to
together.
identify those people?
We were able to identify those people. Yeah, there were a couple in question.
We had some juniors and seniors.
Yeah. Actually, my coworker Beth Horning here was able to help us out with one of them. But yeah, there was a little bit of confusion. I think we have them. Hopefully they'll.
As close as you're gonna
Can
get.
I say- Can I say the jail was in that same building at that time? There was just.
The jail
Did you
right
spend
up
time there?
Yeah, well, fortunately, no. But yeah, I forget if it was right above, right below. You can still see there was a little, it might be a little apartment or something. in there
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
That's the jail.
And this is a great picture for several reasons. Our Meyersdale Community Hospital was dedicated in 1952. This was dedication day. I like the crowd of people. I like the background. One of the many neat things about this picture. Here's our Brethren Church, which would be Meyersdale's original Brethren Church. And does anyone remember the Wilmoth Mansion?
I have a cat's meow of it too.
Yeah, but you can see the top. You can see the top of the Wilmoth Mansion.
My favorite
There
cat's meow.
aren't a lot of images, at least that I'm aware of that home that exist. I wish we had more, and if anyone ever comes across any, please, bring them to the library, at least let us scan them. But yeah, another photo that, we could probably talk about that picture for 5 or 10 minutes alone.
Standard nurses' uniforms, right in the front there.
You'll see more here in
Yeah.
in a second.
All
Yep.
white, yeah.
Yep.
Very white.
We
Oh,
Colin and I love
fantastic.
this picture. It looks like it was taken for a magazine or something. But that was a hospital room in 1952, right? This image, you have a lady pushing a baby carriage, and as Kyle has pointed out in some of our other presentations, back then you could go to Meyersdale and to have a baby. Now, you have to go. You can't have a baby even in Somerset Hospital. And again, they're the classic nurse. You can see the nurses. And I like this quote. Again, Meyersdale has done some great things over time. It really has. And this is a quote that appeared in the Republican upon the dedication of the hospital. And they had noted, the hospital is a very excellent example of what can be done with community spirit. And it is proof that once a community finds itself and realizes the spirit actually exists, there is no job too large to be undertaken. And I think that's true. I think that was true in 1952, and it's still true today. It might be a little harder sometimes than in 1952 to find some community spirit, but you can.
And Meyersdale's ambulance sort of goes hand in hand with the hospital. Although the ambulance came in, it was 1966.
6 or 7.
Yeah. Because this is an image taken during 69, during their 3rd year of operation. And that is, of course, they go sort of hand in hand with the hospital, providing life-saving medicine to the Meyersdale community and the surrounding citizens. And this is sort of a cool photo. It reminds me almost of like Ghostbusters because of the older style ambulance with the lights on top, and everyone's wearing lab coats and goggles or glasses. And it's neat seeing the sign in the background there. They're doing, a fund drive, and at that time the pricing for a family was $8 and an individual was $5 for a year.
So the theme could have been, we'll save you before you become ghosts.
Can you name them? Who are you gonna call?
I don't think we've managed to ID those guys yet. I do have a couple
Why
pages.
does that look like Bill Irwin?
You think one of them's Bill
Third
Irwin?
one over from here, it looks like Bill.
And I think Sheridan Caton's the second one.
All right, well, Linda, you take a picture of that,
Like butchers.
spread
We
it
have to
around
find
on your
out
phone
who
to
this
keep
is.
you in the know.
Identify these people.
Yeah, I do have some some
Yeah,
ambulance
that is
images in the book.
Sheridan.
This, I don't know that this is one of them, but
I can't see it. I can't see who that
He
is.
was older.
Yeah, you're right.
It's Bill Irwin.
Senior.
I think so.
He was
Definitely.
a senior.
Yep.
That second one, man, he looks kind of.
Sheridan, Caton, and Bill Irwin are the two middle.
The two
Excellent.
ones in the middle,
We,
yeah.
we made a decision.
it has been declared.
Our old guys.
And yeah, just along those same lines, the ambulance and the community hospital work very closely together to this day. And they're both two essential emergency institutions
Oh my
that we're
gosh.
very proud to have.
That looks like a
That's my husband, the second one over in this picture.
Oh,
Right
In,
there.
in which one? Here?
Yeah,
Oh, he looks like your sons when they were young.
he doesn't look like that anymore.
Why is he in that picture?
What's that?
Was he part of the ambulance crew?
I think he was. Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
that's
At one
Mr.
time,
Finnegan
he
on
was-
the left.
Yeah.
Didn't he have the Acme? He was the manager out at the Acme.
He was the
Isn't that
mayor.
Mr. Finnegan?
Mhm.
Oh,
On the left, yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, that's Mayor, what's his name?
Oh, he was a mayor. I
Finnegan.
didn't know that.
Finnegan, then Bill.
Mhm.
And then it's, Ford sold the cars.
I don't
Hank
think
Beamer.
So. I don't think so.
Isn't that Hank Beamer?
Here we go. It's him. It's not him. It's
That's the way my husband looked when we got married.
well argued.
When we got married 55 years ago, that's the way Bill looked. Yeah.
That's how you should identify photos. Just get
We
a
were both
crowd
skinny.
and
I
put them
know.
out and-
It's true. I mean, we could have program after program just centered around these old
Name
photos.
that-
Name that.
Name that person.
I
Mystery man.
We've discussed a variation of that idea. Trust me.
That's what it looked like when I was born, because I was born in '69. That's Meyersdale,
Okay.
and I was from Hurl then.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I mean, again, the hospital is a good example of how you, whether you're an individual, you're a town, you're an organization, over time, ultimately, in large part, you have to adapt. My friend Linda says adapt or die. And it's true to some degree. You know, again, we're very lucky we have the hospital. Now, the hospital, they don't deliver babies at the hospital anymore, no. You don't go there for some of the things you used to go there for, but, you know, it's there for a lot of routine testing, which, you know, it's a lot handier to run up the hill to Meyersdale than it is to even have to drive to Somerset, especially as people age, or drive all the way to Johnstown. I mean, if there's a horrible accident and you get to Meyersdale, they can life flight you out from, you know, Meyersdale quicker than, say, if you have to drive to Somerset. So it would be missed. We're fortunate we have it. Has it changed over time? Yes. But hopefully, you know, hopefully we continue to have it. I mean, no one knows for sure what the future's going to bring, but it's another thing that a lot of towns our size don't have a hospital. You know, but there was
There's towns much larger that don't have it.
there are towns larger.
Uh-huh.
All right,
We
ladies.
know more people.
Can we move
We know
on?
more people, yeah.
People
Come in,
Move on, move on.
Come in some Thursday. when
Mary
Linda's-
Hauer and Jim Hahn. Yeah.
All right, and you know, I don't think there are any pictures. When we share pictures on the library's Facebook page, I think Maple Valley just tops the list. You know, it was wonderful, right?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
if you grew up around Meyersdale, Maple Valley
kids
was
loved
just,
it.
it was great. And again, yet another example. Now, obviously the pool's gone, but we do still have Maple Valley Park. But that park is a wonderful example of people coming together and making something happen. There are pictures in the book. This quote, and I have more in the book because we have a scrapbook back there that the Women's Club kept, all about Maple Valley and how it came to be. And I didn't have to write anything to accompany these pictures because the quotes, I don't know who wrote them in the scrapbook. One of these women, but she was a great writer. I've just pulled one of the quotes from that scrapbook for this presentation. And it goes as follows. Dreams are usually had in a few seconds and then forgotten. But when so many people have the same dream and then make that dream come true, that is an achievement. And I mean, they made it happen between the Lions Club and the Women's Club, and I mean, just a number of individuals and organizations, you know, made that park and pool happen.
How high is that slide?
I don't. You,
Too high for today.
That looks pretty impressive.
It was pretty
Do
scary.
you see the little slide in the back? That's where I almost drowned as a kid.
So in like the kiddie section.
Yes, in the kiddie section.
That looks like almost 30
I was
feet.
pretty young. It was one of my first times I almost drowned.
You're a survivor, Ken Coleman. There's a picture that we have in the book of that slide, like kind of from over here, this angle. Now I'm a little bit of
Height.
yeah. When it comes to heights, like if I'm not like feel secure, and I'm like, I don't think I could have done. I don't think I could have. When I was a kid, I don't remember that. I remember they replaced it with a much shorter plastic.
Blue slide.
Yes, the blue slide. That thing.
That's one of
Yeah,
the
that's a
first.
metal slide there.
You
clearly.
couldn't even do that today, right? An insurance company would be like, no, what are you thinking? Like it just wouldn't happen.
True.
You couldn't. You could not build a, yeah. And then the rocks, like now, remember the rocks that were over here? Like these big rocks.
Every mother spent their summers at the rock with their little
Yeah.
Well, they ended
Poor
up.
Kyle and Emily, they're too young. You never knew the joy of
Never
making
knew
that
the
rock.
rocks.
Almost drowning and hitting the rock.
That was
50 feet in the air. Maybe one day.
And who wore a seatbelt on your way to Maple Valley? Why?
really.
Why would you bother?
When you rode on the back of the pickup.
Missed out on it all.
that was my kids' reward to go to Maple Valley.
Well,
If
yeah.
they were good and they went to the bathroom, they went to the potty. That's how
Well, they went to the
That's
bathroom.
why my twins trained. They potty trained because of that. They wanted to go to Maple Valley.
So amidst all these improvements happening to the community, the hospital, the ambulance, Maple Valley, in 1982, Meyersdale was awarded an All-American City Award. And this is something that was awarded by the American Civic, the National Civic League. And Meyersdale was chosen for a number of reasons, including some of the things that we've just touched on, along with having a fire department, a police department. And you'd see here on one of the brochures, they sort of highlight the fact that Meyersdale is home to not only the Pennsylvania Maple Festival, but the Somerset County Fair.
Was that in 82?
82, yeah. Yep, 82. Okay, and this is kind of our transition.
Oh,
Go ahead, Kyle.
So we wanted to be realistic and just highlight some of the contrasts. So you have all of these great things going on in Meyersdale. The town is continuing to expand in terms of its infrastructure and the amenities that we have, but the population is decreasing. And so if we look here, let's just say from the 1940s going down, we begin to see a decline. Up until that point, Meyersdale had reached a height in its population between the 1910s and the 1920s, and then decreased a little bit before recovering slightly between the 30s and the 40s. But the decline from there on out is very slight. So it's not something that would have been felt immediately, but whenever you look at it in retrospective and you think about Meyersdale today compared to 20, 30, 40 years ago, it can really be felt.
But I don't think it's just Meyersdale, right? I mean, that's happened to
it's almost every
a
community.
lot of our small towns, and it's a challenge. And you know, if you're really going to talk about, hey, these are our town's 150 years, you know, you want to highlight the positives, but you know, you also have to spend just a little bit of time being realistic about the challenges.
So again, to kind of contrast that note of Meyersdale having a decreasing population, that doesn't mean that there aren't good things going on to this day. So we wanted to focus on the community center gym floor, which is a restoration project that has been ongoing. It has materialized this year. Some of you may have seen other photos of this. We decided to include that one up there. And the former high school building has continued to be a center for community life. It's where there's a lot of events going on. And whenever we have the Pennsylvania Maple Festival and people come from out of town, it's one of the buildings that they likely go to, you know, for pancakes, for socializing, to meet up with people.
Nice.
So it serves as an introduction to a lot of people to our community. And, you know, again, you have one of these old buildings that we aren't just throwing away or tearing down or letting go. There's ongoing efforts to try and restore it and keep it active for us to use.
But at the same time, you know, the larger an old building is, the bigger the challenges. It just does. It presents challenges. I went by the other day, I drove by the backside of Hazel McGilvery Hospital, which is where my mom was born in 1950. And of course, you know, up Main Street, that if you don't know any better, you just think it was a house. But, you know, at one point it was a hospital, but boy, it looks rough from Main Street, but then when you drive along the side through the alley, it's rough. Like, there's, like, saving that building at this point, like, it would have to be a full-out labor of love. And even then, I don't know. From what I've heard about the inside, I just don't know. This is, George and I were talking a little bit about the clock just yesterday. The clock on what was originally the Second National Bank building right here on the other corner, and the restoration project that the newspaper undertook when Ed Dunlap was publisher to restore the clock. And, you know, it's just an example of, you know, people putting their minds to something and restoring. I mean, this isn't a whole building, it's a clock, but it's a nice focal point in town. And this is an image, a great photo that Mike Piedenbrink captured back in 1921 when our library had our suffrage float in the parade with the old bank building and clock in the background. And, you know, the bank itself, Somerset Trust has done a really nice job of restoring that building.
So just touching again on the emergency services that we have here in town. This is the modern Meyersdale Ambulance Association building, which was completed in 1999. And today it houses 3 emergency vehicles, and it has accommodations for overnight crews. So the ambulance, along with the hospital, has changed, but it's come a long ways, and we're just grateful to still have it in the community. But of course it faces challenges like everything else, which has been the point of discussion in the community over the last year or so, is trying to figure out how we can get more support to, you know, all these different things in our community that need sort of directing back onto, you know, being in good standing financially and things of that nature.
And Kyle's actually been attending some of those ambulance meetings. So we even tossed around the idea. We've got a great collection. You saw a couple of them earlier of photographs dating back to the Ambulance Association's founding in the 60s. And, you know, maybe having an evening where we share those photos, and people like Kyle and a couple other people who have been attending the ambulance meetings, just more a kind of an informational, hey, you want to know more about what's going on with the ambulance? Here are some great old photos, and here are some people who, you know, have been kind of working to try to see that it's a service that continues in our town. Because again, the ambulance is one of those things you don't always realize how important it is until you need it. And then you pick up the phone, call 911, and you know there's a big difference if you have an ambulance association service right in your town, whereas if you're relying on the ambulance 2 towns over, you know. So again, it's something that we have here in Meyersdale at this point, and we're grateful for it.
And Meyersdale's Fire Department is also celebrating a big anniversary this year.
Wow.
Of 125 years of service. And this is a photo captured very recently this year, showing a majority of their membership body. And you can see them sort of dressed up in display front of There are fire trucks in front of their current fire hall building.
Oh, that's quite a
And again, it just sort of shows that, you know, volunteerism is continuing, that spirit still exists in Meyersdale, and hopefully will be here forever.
beautiful.
And we're reaching the end of our presentation, and we really thought, now again, I guess Kyle and I are a little partial. We're both, you know, board members for the Historical Society, but again, the building at the top of Main Street, constructed in 1912, that houses our Historical Society, that's what it looked like in the early 1990s. You know, the railway line was abandoned, I believe it was in 75, and the building just deteriorated over time. Your average person would have looked at it and said, you know, just let's knock it down and start over. You know, but thanks to a dedicated group of, and we all probably knew some of them. Most of them are passed away now, those original people who basically organized the Historical Society initially to undertake the project of restoring this building. Now, fortunately, it's a smaller building than, you know, the Colonial or a lot of the old school buildings, so it wasn't quite as difficult, but boy, it took a lot of individuals, organizations, local government bodies to restore that building. And we have more images of what it looked like back then, but it was rough. But you know, a group of individuals, they knew the trail was coming through, this hiking biking trail running from Pittsburgh to Cumberland, and they, you know, had enough vision to know, you know, this trail might bring a lot of people through. So let's take on this project, and you know, that's, hopefully most of you have been there. If you haven't, please visit. You know, it's free. We open the beginning of April. We're open until the last Sunday in October every year, and it's beautiful. I've been to, Karen and I have been to West Newton, which is a trailhead further, you know, toward Pittsburgh, not far out of Pittsburgh. They have a nice building, but it's a new building meant to look like an old train station. And you know it. I mean, and nothing not taking away from them, because they have a nice conference room. You know, we don't have, be nice if we had a little more space for stuff like that up there. But, you know, when you walk into our station, you know it's an old, you just kind of know it's an old building that's been restored with a lot of hard work.
This is fun. These are 3 of the most popular landmarks along the Great Allegheny Passage, and they can all be found very close to the Meyersdale Trailhead. And of course, we have the Salisbury Viaduct, which has been maintained and is one of the most popular destinations for people, because if you're driving over 219 or you're just coming into town, you can see it. You're driving under it, and people usually wonder what that is, you know, and it's part of the bike trail now. So that attracts a lot of people, you know, just in general because of its prominence in the area. And also we have the Keystone Viaduct headed in the other direction on the southern side if you're going down towards the Maryland direction from the Meyersdale Trailhead. And then my personal favorite landmark on the trail is the Big Savage Tunnel, which is a little bit further away than the other 2, again southbound if you're going down towards the Maryland direction. But it is just a wonderful thing to have, to be able to experience. And you can see that the engraving there is, I believe, 1911. So again, 1911, 1912 is whenever the Western Maryland, the original railroad would have been going in, and all this work would have been done.
Kyle and Karen on a field trip down the train. But we're lucky. I mean, we have all 3 of those structures are within 10 miles of Meyersdale. You know, we're I mean, when you travel the Gap, this section is, I mean, you guys, I'm sure you hear it, Karen. How many people signed our guest book in June? It was over 1,000, right, in June? In June alone. Yeah, yeah. Now, do all of them bike down the hill and come into town? No, some of them, but a lot of them stop at the station. I mean, if at least to use the best restrooms along the trail. You know, a lot of them, that's a main reason we have all these bed and breakfasts in town. Now in the off season, of course, it's the off season, but again, if you spend any time driving or especially walking through town, you see the bikers here, you know, during trail season. You know, they're staying a lot of times, spending a night, you know, picking up something to eat at GI or Duncas's. It's, you know, that railway line being turned into a hiking, biking trail is another great, and I mean, obviously that's well beyond a project Meyersdale undertook, but it's a good thing if you're in a trail town.
So one of the last things that we wanted to touch on, again going back to the newspaper, is the New Republic newspaper. This is an image of the last building it resided in along Center Street here.
And there's someone we know sitting here, right back here.
Yeah.
A younger George Menser.
But we wanted to include this to kind of touch on the impact that the New Republic has had on the community, sort of in its last years. Whenever it donated the photos, the images, the negatives to the library, it kind of fulfilled its motto that it's had since the 1930s, which is not a mere newspaper, but a community service. And so the newspaper, in doing that, is sort of completely fulfilling that slogan even after it's gone. So it continues to serve the community, even if it's indirectly, by the preservation of this history and giving the library the chance to work on this and to preserve this for generations to come.
And all the people who come in, I mean, seriously, Carolyn and I, the library staff just wouldn't have the time to make headway with this photo preservation project, us alone. So the Way We Were Club, it's wonderful, the work that you've all done, because if it wasn't for the people who have contributed in whatever way to preserve and share these pictures, we'd have them, but they'd just be sitting in their boxes. And it's good, but if they're just sitting in their boxes, you know, no one's seeing them and enjoying them. Mr. Menz.
Could I make a comment or two? The gentleman on the far right in the white shirt, that was Mr. Dunlap. He was responsible for bringing the newspaper back in 1992. And but anyhow, he contributed a lot to Meyersdale, whether people know it or not. He didn't want any credit for a lot of things that he did. The second thing is, I commend Jen, because had she not said, George, I'll take those pictures,
Another box?
They would have gone in the dumpster. And I would have cried for 2 days over that, because I had no place else to go. And I called Jen, and like she said, I found a box. Then I found another box. And then, if I remember correctly, we had a cabinet upstairs that when the people that bought the place went up, and we couldn't get it out of there, it was so big, because our elevator was broken. And she says, apparently there was 2 or 3 more.
Yeah, Rachel.
Cartons upstairs in the attic.
After Rachel bought the building, she found a couple more
so
boxes.
I credit Jen with retrieving all this, because there's so much history. I couldn't stand to see it go away. I didn't have a place to store it at the house either, so.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I took them on, but again, I mean, it, and we kind of jumped into the project, which is unusual for me. I overthink everything, but, you know, the early part of January 2023, we just kind of, you know, didn't have a real game plan, and we kind of do now. But it's been really neat. It's been really neat having people come in and be a part of the club. And there's no membership fee. You too can become a member of the club. Our scanner right now is on the fritz, but we're working on that. I don't, that's another story we'll get into. But yeah, we'll take care of that one way or another. But seriously, if you want to come in and you have roots in Meyersdale, you think you might know who some of these people are, you can help us identify, you can help us scan. We have negatives and hard copy pictures. If you just want to come in and, oh, here's an envelope regarding the ambulance, and you want to look through them, you know, we enjoy preserving them, and we enjoy sharing them as well. So, you know, and Kyle's the one who kind of thought of that not too long ago, that, yeah, just by keeping these pictures alive, you know, the newspaper, even though the paper itself doesn't exist anymore, in a way it's kind of living on, and hopefully always will. This is the cover image for the book that we're putting together, and I apologize to anyone who was hoping, you know, I did say earlier this year I was hoping for summer. I've never like worked on a 104-page book before, and I wanted it to be 100 pages, but then there were still some pictures I wanted included, so it got bumped up, but we quit. I quit at 104. It's been proved, you know, several people have looked over it for me, including retired English teacher Penny Stahl. I'm making the edits. Hopefully in the next, let's say 2 weeks, it gets shipped off to Beggs and Confluence. You know, and realistically, I'm hoping October. There's been a lot of interest in it. It contains a lot of neat photographs, thanks to all of our people who have stepped up and helped with this project. And, you know, the newspaper who shared the images with us. I'm not going to read this quote, I'll just leave it up there. This is again out of the Meyersdale commercial in 1898 about Meyersdale. But yeah, that's our program. I'm sorry we ran a little longer, but when we presented in Cumberland, we just kept it an hour, but we thought, no, you know, you're all...
These people aren't going to know Center Street.
Or identify the people in the pictures.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it could have...
Contributions from the peanut gallery.
It wasn't really all that easy to try to figure out, but Kyle put together a good outline, and hopefully we touched on some of the highlights while, you know, still keeping a realistic view. But sometimes we tend to look at what we don't have instead of what we do have. And Meyersdale has its challenges. I mean, we do. You know, there are a lot of empty buildings, and you can't argue that. But we also have a lot of good things in town, and young people who are taking an interest in, you know, helping preserve those good things. So
yeah, I mean, it's not a problem just here though. It's just small communities, but it's how we deal with them, I think, is what, you know, will define Meyersdale.
Do you take questions?
yes,
Where was the previous hospital at before the new one?
there wasn't one.
Yes, it was.
Well, okay, there was. Yeah, you're right.
There were two.
Yeah,
You mean the
there were two. Yeah, you're right. Why did I say there wasn't one that quickly?
Well, they were a little different.
Up the street across from
Yeah.
the garage, and the other one was
Wenzel.
the Wenzel Hospital out on Salisbury.
Wenzel and
The Hazel McGilvery buildings, where that's my mom sitting beside you. She was born there.
so was I.
If you head up Main
We were
Street,
born there.
kind of not directly across from the Methodist that is now the Apostolic Church, but and then there was a Wenzel. Dr. John Wenzel had one out on Salisbury Street. It is now the parking lot. Yeah, unfortunately, the more I dig into history, the more I'm like, oh my gosh, our churches have destroyed key pieces of history. You know, my Lutheran church parking lot. But George, in our defense,
yeah,
you did
that's
say
the
the old
Republic.
Republican building was in rough shape. No, there was Dr. Wenzel had a hospital out on Salisbury Street. Great brick building, but it's gone. Yeah, I think Wenzel's hospital closed in, I want to say 44. Don't hold me to that. So there was probably a 6-8 year point where the Hazel McGilvery was the only hospital, and then when they built what is today our hospital, that's when Dr. Glass closed the Hazel McGilvery.
Okay, I have another question.
Okay.
Did you ever wonder why the Somerset County Fair came to the southernmost portion of the county when Berlin, Somerset had a much more thriving agricultural community than what we did, a much larger one, and they were centrally located. How come that we ended up with the fair?
I think the people who
I know the fair originated as primarily horse racing, and I don't know if that had anything to do with it. Someone told me now this is a vague memory, and I never really delved into it deeply, so I'm not quite sure. Some tie-in with the brethren, and again, now this is not sure fact. This is just a memory that I'm sharing based on something someone shared with me in that room a few years back, maybe. He alluded to something with the Brethren Church and how the Brethren Church used to have the big tent revivals, and there was some tie-in with was there some kind of I don't know. See, it's kind of like a foggy enough memory that I'm not even some tie-in with the fair, but I don't know. I'd have.
When did the horse racing, do you have any idea when that existed?
As early as 1900.
Yeah.
And when did it kind of disappear?
Oh, I don't know. Gosh, now they do have harness racing at the fair. I mean, they still do it to some degree, but
When demolition
It would have been
derby
before the 40s. Because I don't
Yeah,
ever remember
demolition derby.
horse racing when I was a kid. That was not our racing.
Celebrate 125 years.
next year will be 125 for the fair. Okay. Okay.
There were just
Yeah.
people here that were more interested in doing it.
There was
And the
some.
leadership maybe was here.
and that horse racing, I think, too, those people maybe.
Yeah. I do think, Carla, there was
60s, so.
some, like another fair or something in Jenners or Jennerstown. Yeah. At one point, there were kind of two overlapping fairs, maybe. Yeah, I'm not specifically quite well versed enough on the fair itself to fully answer that question. I honestly think, I mean, this is just kind of a personal opinion the more I learn about Meyersdale. I think if Meyersdale would have been more centrally located in the county, Meyersdale would have given Somerset a run for its money as far as being the county seat.
The county seat, yeah.
But, I mean, yeah, its geographical location to be the county seat really didn't make sense. But I think, I mean, truly and honestly, in the earliest days of the 20th century, Meyersdale had as much to offer as Somerset did.
But we had two railroads.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to imagine. 2 railroads, 2 newspapers.
2 theaters.
2 theaters.
Yeah. But it is also interesting, like as Kyle pointed out with that population chart, you know, when I talk to people a little older than me, I mean, I always hear, you know, oh, you came to town on a Saturday night and the streets were so packed. But even at that point in time, the town's population was starting to decline, but you didn't really notice it. But then again, I mean, okay, let's go back to the 50s. You know, TV's kind of just becoming a thing. You don't have computers, you don't have things. You kind of went to town more as a social outlet, right? There wasn't as much to do socially at home. You know, there are a lot of things that change in society in general that impact our communities. Even travel, like, you know, over the decades we can get such longer distances in such shorter times. You know, I know, you know, my grandparents, for example, you know, a lot of us, when we think of our grandparents, not every family even had a car. You know, my grandma lived down on Keystone Street, and they had one car, but, you know, she walked in here to the shirt factory. You know, it's not like now, how many families do you know where everyone, I mean, once you're driving age, everyone has a car. Everyone has a car, everyone's moving, everyone can get from here to there like that. And that impacts communities. So, along with the fact that now and most of us are guilty of it to some degree. We sit there with our noses in our devices and, you know, are less prone to come out for social engagements and church and everything else. I mean, look at the way they dressed in those, you know. I mean, you went to church and you dressed to go to church. I personally am glad I don't have to get that dressed up to go to church, but that's just me. But those old dresses were pretty cool, but then putting them on probably took you 15 minutes.
There was more public transportation too. Big trolleys, and some communities had buses that you could take, so I don't think it was as centric around having individual automobiles to get places.
Yeah. I don't know. I joke around with the people coming in the PA room. I'm working on a time travel machine. So, you know, when I get it completed, we can all travel back.
Okay.
Yeah, library helpers get first dibs, so keep that in mind. But it would be fascinating to step back into Meyersdale, let's say about 1910. You know? And I don't know if it would be neater if you knew, like, if you, I talk about this like it's possible, you know, like if you knew, if you would, what would be neater if you could step into Meyersdale in 1910 knowing now what you know or not? You know what I mean? It might.
You'd sound like John the Baptist preaching, you know, hell prayers. You don't know what the future holds. You won't believe what the future holds, you know?
Maybe there's videos still. What about the 1937 video? Was that, did that kind of give you a feel when Samantha presented that?
Oh yeah, I mean it's a neat snapshot in time, just like all
that
these.
That was an actual video, or
Seeing it in a video is different than just seeing it still photography. It's more immersive, I think, for getting a bad idea. Yeah, and then in the Pennsylvania room too, you wonder a lot, like when you're sharing this history now, or we're scanning these images. You know, here's this machine that you put this negative on, and it scans it, and there's the picture on your computer, and what would the people from 1910 think about the fact we can even do this? You know, and then what will people be able to do 100 years from now that we can't imagine? I don't know. History is always evolving. It's always changing. We have to change along with it to some degree, but you know, at the same time, acknowledging and paying respect to our past as we do. So, but yeah, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
If you have any questions on the Power Library or anything, let me know. If you want some backtracks or a Historical Society membership, head up to the station, get yourself some tickets. There's library literature over there. Terry has your little tokens, I guess, for the radar.
Just a little bag of the...
Yeah, you can slip over there if you have a second in radar program. So Terry has some library things she needs as director. There's a lot she has to think about as director that the rest of us don't. But thank you for coming.